All right, Kyle, I appreciate you joining me today. I think all of this started, we kind of had an opportunity to reconnect after it's been a while since we originally worked together. And
Hmm.
I so appreciate you taking the time to kind of jump on today and just share a little bit about your experience and kind of provide an update on how things have been going. So I'm going to turn it over to you and just maybe if you can introduce yourself and just tell me a little bit about what brought you in originally maybe to meet with me, that would be great.
Awesome. So thanks, Anna. Yeah, it's great to be talking again. So yeah, like you said, we start. I think it was about a year ago, right?
It was.
We were meeting together. So I'm obviously middle 30s. I just turned 34. So kind of my background is when I was 22, I was diagnosed with Crohn's. Kind of a shock to myself and my family, not really knowing. Took a long time to get to the actual diagnosis. So, that was a relief in itself. So, but had been doing treatment with a gastroenterologist for, it had been 11 years at that point. And, at that point I was just looking for a way to get off my medications, an alternative, I think, to the standard treatment of Crohn's. And I had read some stuff about it and, was just wanting to explore that path. So I don't know, maybe would it be helpful to I tell everybody what Crohn's is?
Yeah, that'd be great.
um,
That'd be great.
so Crohn's is an autoimmune inflammatory bowel disease with no medical cure known. So basically what happens is you have an immune response in your small bowel or large bowel for Crohn's, and your body reacts by creating inflammation. And when I was diagnosed, I actually had such a bad inflammation that it couldn't be reduced with prednisone or a anti-inflammatory drug. So they actually had to remove two sections of my small bowel that were basically damaged beyond repair. And so that was a shock in itself too. So that's a little bit about what Crohn's is, I guess.
Yeah. Where do you feel like you
Where I
were?
started.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Where do you feel like you were at with, so you mentioned one of your main goals was getting off of medication. Where do you feel like you were, like, so you were on medication when you came in to see me. How was that management going for you at the time? Like, do you feel like, that was taking care of it, or just kind of where do you feel like your treatment was at when you first came in?
So, excuse me. So I had been, like I said, on medications for about 11 years. The first 7 or 8 of those years were on an immune suppressant called Imuran or azathioprine, which is used
Mouthful.
for yeah, which is used for to give everybody an idea, it's used for like organ transplants to keep your body from rejecting the drug. So, but then in the last couple of years, I'd switched over because that drug wasn't working as well. I'd switched over to a biologic called Humira, which most everybody's seen the commercial and the fast-paced talking at the end of the commercial. Side
All the side
effects.
effects.
So when I had started Humira, I had a couple flare-ups where I'd feel upset stomach, or I knew there was some inflammation going on just by how my body was reacting. And so even when I started Humira, I had started researching a little bit on foods and nutrition, and a little bit about what could be causing the inflammation that I was ingesting. So I feel like, and it's really, I don't really, well, I have a better idea now, but at the time I didn't know, was the Humira working? Would it take longer for it to work to control the symptoms? And so I had those conversations with my GI doc. In fact, I had probably had that conversation annually for about a year for my entire treatment about, what is food's role in all of this? And I think my doctor just wasn't knowledgeable enough to really have that conversation on the foods and nutrition side. So it never really went much farther than that. But I guess back to your original question, I feel like once I started the Humira, I started testing out some things and
Yeah.
felt like I got to a point where my symptoms were under control, but it
Mhm.
was really never known to me whether that was the Humira that had built up in my system, or if it was kind of the actions I had taken on my side for the food.
Sure. You've always struck me as someone who very much wants to kind of like understand and have a good understanding of how your body's working, and you and your wife obviously have such a strong desire to just lead healthy lives in general. And so I definitely can see in you like wanting to make sure like, okay, what is this that, is this Humira helping, or, is it something I'm doing on my own? If it's something I'm doing on my own, do I need the Humira? So really just trying to kind of get to kind of the root of what's helping, what's triggering, and getting those answers.
Yeah. And I think kind of what, led me to you and, looking for a nutritionist is, I'd finally had enough of those conversations with my GI doctor and he wasn't providing any personal or support to make that transition. I'd asked him many times, what about doing no medications? And there was almost, I don't want to say a scare tactic, but a scare tactic in that if you stop taking the medication, it might not work if you have to go back on it. And there's only so many Crohn's drugs out there, probably less than you can count on one hand.
Yeah.
So you almost check one off the list. And so that was a risk, I think, with, taking that big step. So
yeah.
I was looking for support to take that leap.
Yeah. Well, so let's transition to that point. So, you reached out to me, we got connected, and we jumped on a call, started having a conversation just about what are some of those maybe options that either I could help you with, or in general that you had, as far as if you wanted to get to a place off of the Humira, or see if you could be off of the Humira. And I think that's where a lot of our conversations started was, is it even possible for me to go off of Humira? And can we get to the point where we can trial that? And so we had that conversation, and kind of tell me your just initial thoughts about the process. And, if you had any hesitations. I'm kind of more thinking immediately after we got off our first phone call, you hadn't really signed up to work with me yet. Kind of tell me what you were thinking, and kind of what that conversation was like with your wife when you guys then went and talked about it and decided if this was the right fit for you.
Yeah, so I think right after we talked, I had a lot to think about because you offered a lot of great information just on that first call. But it was really, making a decision to, am I going to go down that path where I go med-free? Because really, to me, it was, if I signed up, that was my goal and that was my mission, and I was committing at that point to go off the Humira.
Yeah.
And so you have those things racing through your mind. Like I said, okay, well, the one drug, it might not be an option down the road. And with no cure, that's one less drug. So that was a big thing that was, I think, that I needed to decide on. The other part that, we had a discussion about was just about, the cost. And I think we talked a little bit about that the most health insurance don't cover your services in full. So we had to have a conversation, my wife and I wanted her input too, as to, is that something we agreed upon, and was it worth it? And, in the end, it was completely worth it, and I'd do it, over again every time. But I think it's important to have that conversation with, your wife, your spouse, and your family, and get their buy-in, because it is part of what you're signing up for.
Absolutely. And I think one thing I loved about your situation is your wife was so supportive, and your family was so supportive of you really, getting to a point of supporting your goals of wanting to get off of the Humira and going in that direction. So I think that was super helpful too.
Right. We had worried, I'll just add that, she was just as supportive, because we had worried, we have 3 kids, and we had worried all through having those 3 kids, what are these medicines doing? How are they interacting with this? And, so, just, it impacted us both. It impacted our whole family. So it really was a family discussion.
Absolutely. Which I think is so important. You mentioned that you feel like it ultimately, and I'm happy to hear this feedback for sure, but that you felt like it ultimately was worth the investment that you were making. So it kind of just share with me what you feel like. How did you feel like it was different, or what really made it ultimately worth the investment, and something that you can reflect back on and be happy that you move forward with?
So I'd say before, working with you, I had read some stuff. I had some ideas in my head about, how nutrition and foods and how that impacted your body. But, long term, it was, the tool set that I have now from working with you, and understanding what foods impact me, how my body reacts to them. And if I ever get in a situation where I get off track, I know the process and how to get back onto track. So
Yeah.
I feel like I really have the lifelong tools now to make that, to keep myself healthy and to live a long life without medications. So
Yeah. So important, because we obviously, and especially in your situation where, or, anytime that you're using something like the Humira and it's a possibility to maybe not be able to go back on it, that ability to make sure that we can keep you off of it, and you not have a need to reach back out to something in the future. We certainly don't want any kind of short-term solutions. We're really after, can we make sure you're at a place where you're free of those things long term.
right.
So yeah. Very cool. So kind of tell us then, like you mentioned when we first started, it's been about a year since we were working together. So kind of fill me in what's life been like in the last year, and just kind of where you feel like your Crohn's and everything is at, and how you're managing now.
So so the last year's been great. I've been off the medicine like we've talked about. Something I didn't mention earlier that was about the same time we met, and I think it's relevant to the last year, but was that one of the symptoms I was showing was psoriasis, and on my hands specifically. And we really didn't know what was causing that, because psoriasis is a side effect of Humira. So we didn't know if that was, was that my immune response, was, via the foods I was eating, or was that Humira side effect? And so that's something over the last year that I've probably noticed the most drastic change in, is that it was kind of a slow process, but as I kept up with the foods and the Humira, as the half-life degraded out of my system, I'll never know for sure which one it was. But that symptom that I had that was pretty much uncontrollable when I was on the Humira, because it was just a known side effect and you deal with it, has pretty much been resolved. And I don't know if you can see very well on the camera, but pretty much my hands are, I have dry hands still, but yeah, there's no psoriasis. So so that's been a huge in addition to the no medicines, that's been a huge life improvement too.
Well, and that's sometimes such the challenging thing is, so your Crohn's was in a fairly good place on the Humira, and when you reached out, but then you've got this side effect of the psoriasis, and you're so right. It could go either way. Psoriasis is another kind of autoimmune, more skin condition, and so it could be just a result of your immune response, or it could be that Humira. And so, it's just trying to sort through all of those different things. And great that your gut's in a good place, but also, you certainly don't want to have to continue to deal with psoriasis and all of that forever either. So,
right.
And that shouldn't be the trade-off to have your Crohn's under control, is to have to deal with psoriasis just to keep the Crohn's managed. So,
right. Yeah. Those negative side effects are really the thing that I wanted to get away from.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me think. Is there anything else you've shared your, so much of your story already, but is there anything else that, as you kind of reflect back on the last year and our time together, is there anything else, especially obviously you're speaking out there too, to anyone who's maybe considering working with me in the future. So is there anything else that you would throw out or that you would want people to know?
I think that, it's important to invest in our health, because I think so many people put other things first, or they just almost rely. I think that society in general relies too much on the medical profession and the industry to help treat their symptoms or to treat their illnesses. And I think you owe it to yourself a little bit to to seek out other alternatives and to at least educate yourself on them at the very least. If you have a disease, or you just want to become healthier, or you're overweight, or whatever it is. But ultimately, I think the medical field there is to help you, and they're researching just like everybody else. So I think that taking that personal investment is really the key differentiator. And then partnering along someone like yourself has given me the positive reinforcement, the tool set I need, definitely, and the encouragement to do it. I'll say, just add the last little bit here that I wanted to make sure I got in, but when we were working together, I remember that I went into it with the Humira, still on the Humira as a safety net. And, we got about, I think it was like 4 weeks in, and I was just like, at that point, I needed to rip the safety net out from underneath me. Otherwise, I wasn't sure if I was ever going to do it. So we just decided, okay, today is the day. And I did it, and no looking back now. But I think you have to have that sense of confidence and, try it and be willing to take the risk to be healthier.
Yeah. And I will say, just to clarify for everyone out there too, who might be wondering, okay, do I start this and stop my Humira the next day? And just to clarify, as Kyle mentioned, like we get, a ways into the process, we start working on calming the immune system down and build that confidence level to then be able to say, okay, because I think at that point, even though your psoriasis was slow to heal too, and a lot of that had to do with then being able to get eventually off the Humira. But when we can start to see some change in symptoms, even if it's that psoriasis, it gives us that confidence to say, okay, we're now at a point where we can work with your doctor and otherwise and work on coming off of that Humira. So it's certainly not where we start on day one and trade for the other. But our goal is always, especially if getting off of medication is your kind of motivation to start seeing some changes, build that progress up, build that confidence, and then work with the doctor on being able to get that plan for coming off of it. And I'm just so thrilled that it's worked out so well for you. And you were so much fun to work with. And, we've talked several times about the investment of just your time, your energy, your money, all of those things in this process. And really you are committing to your goals, and in your case of getting off of the Humira. And I appreciate that you entrusted me to help you with that process and invested in us working together. And then just equally as grateful that you decided to join me today and that you're willing to share kind of your story. And it's such a good opportunity a year later to be able to kind of circle back and just see where you're at and catch up and see how things are going.
Definitely. And I just want to say thank you. And, I appreciate, everything you did, all the help you provided me. I was thinking about it, and since I was diagnosed with Humira, since I was diagnosed with Crohn's, I have Humira. But since I was diagnosed with Crohn's, coming off my medication and, living a healthier, more sustainable lifestyle is probably it is the biggest life event that's happened to me. Besides obviously having my 3 beautiful kids, but personally, that's been a huge life change for me. And I just want to say thank you for helping me down that path and achieving that goal. So
yeah, it's been my pleasure. And again, it's fun to do when we get to work so well together, and you've been a joy to work with too. So thanks again for joining me today. And yeah, I hope the next year just keeps getting better and better. And, maybe you just need to touch base every year or so and make sure, or just check in and see how things are going. And I just love to hear the progress. So thanks, Kyle.
Sounds great.
All right. Bye.